Something changed overnight, and if you live in the United States, you need to hear this before the week goes any further. NOAA's Climate Prediction Center issued an official El Nino advisory just yesterday, June 11th, confirming what the models have been signaling for weeks. El Nino is no longer coming, it is here, and forecasters are not whispering about this one. They are using words like moderate to strong, accelerating, and in some scientific circles the phrase Super El Nino is already appearing in peer-reviewed discussion. The Nino 3.4 index has crossed into positive territory. The Walker circulation, the massive east-to-west atmospheric conveyor belt driven by temperature differences across the Pacific, has broken down. The equatorial Pacific is running anomalously warm, and it is going to keep warming through the fall and into winter. Here is what we are covering today. First, what this El Nino arrival means for your weather this weekend and into next week, including a severe weather setup you need to know about right now. Second, the full 7-day breakdown with specific dates, because the pattern is shifting faster than most people realize. Third, the long-range picture, and why the second half of this summer is going to feel dramatically different from the first. And finally, the most critical piece, the one that changes the entire forecast conversation, what happens when El Nino continues to strengthen toward potentially record levels, and what the historical record tells us that could mean for tens of millions of Americans across every region of this country. Stay with me all the way through. This one matters. I am Arthur, and this is Sky Space Lab, your source for serious data-driven weather science every single day. If this is your first time here, subscribe right now and turn on notifications. This channel gives you the kind of forecast depth and atmospheric context you're not going to find anywhere else. No panic, no manufactured drama. Just the data, analysed with precision and delivered straight to you. Let us get into it. The timing of this El Nino declaration matters more than most casual weather coverage is acknowledging today. Here is exactly why. NOAA declared El Nino official on June 11th, 2026. That is yesterday. The Nino 3.4 monitoring region, that critical 5-degree band straddling the equator in the central and eastern Pacific between 120 and 170 degrees west longitude, has been running above threshold consistently enough to trigger the official advisory. The Climate Prediction Center alert system has moved to El Nino advisory status. That is not a watch. That is not a preliminary outlook. That is a declaration backed by atmospheric coupling between the ocean surface and the winds above it. Forecasters predict a 63% chance that sea surface temperatures in that monitored region will exceed 2.0 degrees Celsius by fall. 2 degrees Celsius is the benchmark for a strong El Nino, and some individual ensemble members on the European Centre for Medium-Range Weather Forecasts are already showing anomalies pushing past 4 degrees Celsius by autumn, values that would be off the historical chart entirely. But I want to be very clear about something before we discuss fall and winter. El Nino does not wait for December. It begins to restructure the weather pattern from the moment it declares itself, and the effects on your summer forecast are already showing up in real-time data right now, this week. The Climate Prediction Center, Hazards Outlook, issued at 3 p.m. Eastern yesterday, June 11th, identifies a subtropical ridge over the southeast and the Gulf Coast region that is already beginning to expand northwestward across the southern and central plains. That ridge is El Nino's fingerprint on your summer atmosphere. It is pushing heat southward and westward. It is shifting where the moisture corridors run. And critically, it is establishing a collision zone between that advancing warm, humid air and the active storm system still cycling southward out of Canada. That collision zone is centered over the middle of the country, and it is going to be active for weeks. The latest model run just came in, and it changed the picture significantly for the weekend. Here is who needs to watch this the most over the next 48 to 72 hours. If you are in central or eastern Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, Missouri, or western Illinois, you're sitting inside the leading edge of a pattern that is loading the lower atmosphere with significant energy. The GFS and the European model are both showing surface temperatures climbing into the low 90s across the central plains by Sunday, with dew points in the mid to upper 60s building steadily from the south. That combination, hot, humid air underneath a jet stream being reorganized from above by El Nino, is a textbook setup for supercell thunderstorms. The Storm Prediction Center's current outlook carries a slight risk area for parts of the northern plains through the weekend. The primary threats are large hail, including hailstones up to 2 inches in diameter, and damaging wind gusts reaching 60 to 70 miles per hour in the most organized cells. An isolated tornado or two cannot be ruled out across central South Dakota and into southwestern Minnesota, particularly during the peak afternoon heating hours on Saturday, between 3 p.m. and 8 p.m. local time. If you are in those areas, have your tornado action plan ready before you go to bed tonight. The flooding signal is the other piece you cannot ignore. The Weather Prediction Center's quantitative precipitation forecast for the next 5 days shows a corridor of heavy rainfall building from the Texas Panhandle northeastward through Kansas and into Iowa. Some model solutions are showing localized totals of 3 to 5 inches in that corridor over a 48 to 72-hour window. Flash flooding will be a real threat. If you live near a creek, a drainage basin, or any low-lying flood-prone area inside that corridor, take that seriously today. Down across the southeast, the subtropical ridge is keeping things mostly dry and hot. Along the Gulf Coast region, particularly the Florida Panhandle and coastal Alabama and Mississippi, a persistent daily sea breeze convection threat maintains afternoon storm chances through the weekend. Highs in the mid to upper 90s are expected from Houston eastward through New Orleans and Mobile heading into Saturday. Heat index values could approach 105 to 108 degrees Fahrenheit along coastal areas in the afternoon hours. If you're outdoors for extended periods in that region, hydrate aggressively and limit your exposure during peak heat hours from noon to 5 p.m. This is only the beginning of the story. Let me walk you through the next 7 days with specific dates, because the pattern is about to evolve in ways that directly affect your planning. Friday, June 12th, today. The immediate focus is on the northern plains and the upper Midwest. A mid-level trough is digging southward out of Canada, and as it interacts with a surge of moisture building northward from the south, the atmosphere is primed for thunderstorm development by mid to late afternoon. The primary risk window is from 2 p.m. to 9 p.m. local time across the Dakotas and into Minnesota. Large hail is today's main concern. Keep your storm alerts active all afternoon and into the evening. Saturday, June 13th. This is the most active single day of the weekend. The low-pressure system tracking eastward from the Rockies will deepen as it crosses the central plains. Convective available potential energy, the atmospheric fuel that powers thunderstorm intensity, is forecast to reach 2,000 to 2,500 joules per kilogram across a broad area from Kansas northward through Nebraska and into Iowa. That is more than enough energy to support supercell thunderstorms capable of producing all hazards. The greatest tornado risk on Saturday falls along a corridor from central Nebraska down through northwestern Kansas, with the most dangerous window between 4 p.m. and 10 p.m. If you are in that corridor, have a plan before Saturday afternoon arrives. Know where your shelter is. Sunday, June 14th. The system shifts eastward. Missouri and Illinois come into focus. The severe threat lowers compared to Saturday, but widespread heavy rainfall becomes the primary story. Flooding risk increases significantly across the lower Missouri River Valley and along the middle Mississippi River corridor. 2 to 3 inches of rain in a short period is possible across parts of central Illinois. That rainfall is going to fall on ground that is already holding moisture from recent storm activity. Runoff response will be rapid. Flash flood watches are likely for portions of that corridor. Monday, June 15th. A brief lull settles over much of the country as the system pushes into the Great Lakes region. Michigan and northern Indiana see showers and lingering thunderstorms, but the severe threat drops significantly compared to the weekend. A ridge briefly tries to rebuild across the central plains, but it is not going to hold. Tuesday, June 16th. A new system is emerging from the Pacific Northwest, and the GFS has been consistently flagging this feature for the past several model runs. As it drops southeastward into the Rocky Mountain region, it is going to interact with a re-energized moisture plume building from the south, and the subtropical jet that El Nino is strengthening is going to play a much more active role this time. I am watching Tuesday into Wednesday very closely for the potential of another organized severe weather episode across the central and southern plains. The atmosphere is not going to get a long rest. Wednesday, June 17th. The El Nino influence asserts itself even more clearly in the mid-range. Precipitation anomalies are trending above normal across the southern tier. The latest European ensemble mean is showing a broad area of enhanced rainfall probability from Texas northeastward through the Tennessee Valley and into the Carolinas. If you are in Georgia, the Carolinas or the Tennessee Valley, the second half of June is going to be meaningfully wetter than what you experienced through most of the spring. Prepare for elevated local flood risk as soils continue to saturate. Thursday, June 18th. The pattern has now fully transitioned into the El Nino summer regime, and this brings me to the big picture, the part I have been building toward. But here is where the story takes a fundamental turn, and I will show you exactly why in just a moment. Let me take you above the day-to-day forecast now and show you what is actually happening to the atmosphere on the large scale, because this is the context that most weather coverage skips entirely, and it is precisely the information you need to understand what is coming this summer and into fall. El Nino is not just a number on a sea surface temperature anomaly map. It is an atmospheric engine, a reorganizer of global circulation patterns that operates on a scale difficult to fully visualize. When the equatorial Pacific warms beyond that critical threshold and the ocean-atmosphere system begins to couple, it fundamentally alters the position and strength of the jet streams that steer our weather systems across North America. When it warms enough to qualify as a strong or super event, the effects are not subtle. They are significant, they are persistent, and they cascade across multiple seasons. Here is the core mechanism, and I want to explain this so clearly that you will understand every forecast I give you for the rest of this summer. In a developing El Nino summer, the Pacific jet stream strengthens and extends much further eastward than its typical summer position. It reaches across the Pacific and begins to interact with the subtropical jet, the southern branch of upper-level atmospheric flow, which simultaneously intensifies. That combination shifts the preferred storm track across the United States. Instead of systems diving steeply southward into the northern plains from the northwest, the flow reorganizes into a flatter, more elongated pattern across the central states. Westerlies strengthen across the southern tier. Moisture from the eastern Pacific and the tropical regions gets pulled more aggressively northward into the central and southern United States. And here is something remarkable about this particular developing event. The Severe Weather Europe Analysis Team, one of the most rigorous independent atmospheric research groups in the world, published a finding this week that the first clear atmospheric impacts of this El Nino are already detectable in velocity potential forecast data. Velocity potential is a diagnostic that meteorologists use to reveal large-scale rising and sinking motion in the atmosphere. It is one of the most sensitive indicators of ENSO forcing on the global circulation. The fact that we can see El Nino's fingerprint in that data already, in June, at the very moment of the official advisory declaration, tells us that this event is coupling with the atmosphere faster than a typical developing El Nino. The temperature pattern for mid and late June already matches the historical El Nino composite analysis. Above normal temperatures across the west and central plains, below normal across parts of eastern Canada and the eastern United States, and below normal precipitation across the central and western United States, with enhanced precipitation across the southern tier. That pattern is in the forecast data right now. It is not speculation. It is already in the models. Now, what does the historical record of developing El Nino summers tell us specifically about what the central and eastern United States should expect over the coming weeks and months? The analysis from Severe Weather Europe, drawing on multiple decades of historical El Nino development years, shows something very specific about hail and derecho risk during these summers. States with potential for increased hail events include Colorado, Wyoming, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, northern Texas, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina. That is a broad corridor running from the Central Plains all the way to the southeast coast. It is also precisely the corridor that the pattern we are building toward, a stronger subtropical jet, more moisture, more active surface low-pressure tracks, is going to threaten repeatedly through June, July, and August. The derecho threat during El Nino development summers is particularly elevated. Let me explain why that matters so much. A derecho is a fast-moving, long-lived line of thunderstorms capable of producing widespread damaging winds across hundreds of miles in 12 to 24 hours. They are most common during summer months from South Dakota southeastward through Iowa, Missouri, and into Illinois. The pattern that El Nino is now establishing, frequent westerly disturbances, high moisture content in the lower atmosphere, and an enhanced subtropical jet providing organization from above, is textbook derecho environment. This is one of the stronger developing El Nino summer setups I have tracked in several years. The derecho corridor from South Dakota through central Kentucky is at elevated risk through the remainder of this summer season. Make sure your emergency plan is updated right now, not tomorrow, right now. I also want to address what El Nino means for the monsoon season across the southwest, because this is something that directly affects a large population and is often underreported in mainstream coverage. The North American monsoon, which typically begins to establish itself across New Mexico, Arizona, and southern Colorado in early to mid-July, is going to be heavily influenced by this developing El Nino. The positive Pacific meridional mode, an index of sea surface temperature variability in the northeastern Pacific that is closely linked to El Nino development, is already enhancing the subtropical jet across the southern United States. That enhanced jet carries substantial moisture from the eastern Pacific northward toward the southwest. In strong El Nino years, the monsoon can bring both beneficial and destructive outcomes simultaneously. The moisture fuels spectacular thunderstorm development across the high desert. But that moisture also falls on landscapes that have been dried and destabilized by weeks of extreme heat and drought. The result is flash flooding, rapid, violent, and often deadly flooding in slot canyons and desert washes that can fill in seconds. Mudslides become a threat on any steep terrain that has been denuded by fire activity. If you live in New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, or Utah, the monsoon this summer is going to be an important story, and I will be tracking it closely for you. There is another side of this El Nino coin that is equally important for a different reason. Drought conditions are simultaneously deepening across the Pacific Northwest, Northern California, Northern Nevada, and the Northern Rocky Mountain states. Above normal temperature probabilities exceeding 60% are forecast for the Great Basin and Rocky Mountain region through late June and into July. Combined with entrenched precipitation deficits that have been building through the spring, that is a wildfire weather setup of serious concern. AccuWeather specifically identified California, Idaho, Montana, Nevada, Oregon, Utah, Washington, and Wyoming as the core heat and wildfire corridor for this summer. That assessment is looking more credible with every passing week. Most channels are not showing you this part, but it matters enormously for the tens of millions of people who live in those states. For the agricultural communities of the Midwest, and I know many of you watching this are either farmers or tied to the agricultural economy, here is the picture that the models are showing for the rest of June and into July. The European ensemble for June through August is showing more rainfall over the northern plains and the upper Midwest than earlier seasonal forecasts suggested. The corn and soybean crops across Iowa, Illinois, and Indiana have been under a drier regime through much of the spring. The shift in pattern that El Nino is producing means the second half of June looks meaningfully wetter for those states. That is good news for crop development, but it comes with organized storm risk attached, and that storm risk is real and potentially damaging. One more thing about the pattern shift that deserves emphasis. The Climate Prediction Center's hazards outlook for the period of June 19th through June 25th explicitly shows the subtropical ridge expanding northwestward across the southern and central plains. When that ridge expands in that direction during a developing El Nino, it acts as a heat pump, pulling very hot air northward from Texas and Mexico into the central states. The weekend after next is going to feel significantly warmer across the plains than the current week. I am watching that period closely for the potential of the first significant heat advisory events of the summer season across the central states. So where does this all come together? We have an active severe weather corridor from the plains to the Midwest. We have a deepening drought and wildfire threat across the west. We have a heat dome building across the central states, and underneath all of it, we have an El Nino signal strengthening with each passing week. Hold all of that in your mind, because what comes next is the piece that puts everything in context. Before we wrap up, there is one more thing you need to know, and this is the part I've been building toward throughout this entire video. The El Nino that NOAA declared this week is not just another seasonal signal to file away and revisit in December. Based on every modelling system the international forecasting community is running right now, it is potentially a historic event, one that may rival the strongest El Nino events in the modern instrumental record. Let me give you the numbers directly, because they deserve your full attention. The IRI/Columbia University ENSO forecast plume, updated through May 2026, shows El Nino probabilities at 98% for the May through July 2026 period, 97 to 98% through the forecast horizon, extending to early 2027. Those are not just high probabilities. Those are among the most confident ENSO forecasts the international modelling community has issued in a generation. There is essentially no scenario in the guidance where El Nino fails to develop and persist. The European Centre for Medium-Range Weather Forecasts, widely regarded as the gold standard of global seasonal prediction, has the median Nino 3.4 anomaly for fall 2026 running at approximately 3 degrees Celsius. 3 degrees Celsius. Some individual ensemble members are showing anomalies exceeding 4 degrees. To put that in historical context, only a handful of El Nino events have ever approached those intensity levels in the entire modern record. 1997 through 98 produced a peak anomaly near 2.4 degrees. 2015 through 2016 reached approximately 2.6 degrees. Those are the benchmark super events in modern history. If this El Nino reaches values approaching 3 to 4 degrees, it would be the strongest event in the instrumental record. And here is the detail that the modelling community is watching most carefully. Each successive ECMWF forecast run over the past 3 months has come in stronger than the previous one. March showed a strong event, April showed a stronger event, May showed an even stronger event. The Severe Weather Europe team specifically documented this trend in analysis published this week. Every new model run is starting from a slightly warmer ocean baseline, because the subsurface heat content in the Pacific has been building and building. Each new analysis captures that heat more accurately than the previous one, and each new forecast comes in higher as a result. That directional consistency is not typical for a normal El Nino development cycle. It suggests the ocean-atmosphere coupling is accelerating in a way that the standard model initialization was initially underestimating, and if that trend continues through the summer as the event peaks, the fall and winter impacts could be truly remarkable. NOAA forecasters are giving a 63% chance of the Nino 3.4 region exceeding 2 degrees Celsius by fall. But the ECMWF ensemble suggests the median outcome may already be tracking close to 3 degrees. The gap between NOAA's probabilistic guidance and the European Centre's deterministic ensemble is something I am going to be monitoring very closely in the weeks ahead, because if the European Centre is right and NOAA's current probabilistic language is still conservative, the intensity of this event may exceed even the most aggressive current forecasts. What does a strong to super El Nino mean for the United States in fall and winter? Every El Nino is different in its precise expression. The scientists are careful to say that, and I am going to be careful too. But history provides a powerful framework. In the strongest El Nino events on record, 97 through 98 and 2015 through 2016, the fall and winter atmospheric impacts across the United States were profound and widespread. The southern jet stream was turbocharged. California and the desert southwest saw historic precipitation, flooding years for the Colorado River Basin, overflow events in the southwest deserts that happen once in a generation. Texas and the Gulf Coast region were hit with relentless storm systems throughout winter. The southeastern Florida saw elevated rainfall totals month after month. Meanwhile, the northern tier of the country ran unusually warm from the Pacific Northwest through the Great Lakes and New England. Great Lakes ice cover fell well below normal. The pattern in those events was coherent, it was persistent, and it impacted essentially every region of the country simultaneously. If this El Nino reaches the intensity levels that the European Centre is currently projecting, that is the atmospheric baseline we would be preparing for heading into fall 2026 and winter 2026 to 2027. Now, what about the Atlantic hurricane season? Because I know that is what many of you in coastal communities are thinking about. The answer here is genuinely the most reassuring part of this entire story. NOAA's official 2026 Atlantic hurricane season outlook gives a 55% chance of a below-average season. Between 8 and 14 total named storms are forecast for the full June through November period. Only 3 to 6 of those are expected to reach hurricane status. At most, 3 could become major hurricanes of Category 3 or higher. The primary reason behind that subdued forecast is exactly what we have been discussing today: El Niño. As it strengthens across the equatorial Pacific, it generates increased wind shear across the entire Atlantic basin, and that wind shear physically tears apart developing tropical systems before they can organize into dangerous storms. The modelling community is in strong agreement on this assessment. The European seasonal model shows warm subtropical Atlantic water temperatures combined with below-average tropical precipitation and suppressed deep convection across the main development region, extending from the Lesser Antilles to the African coast. That is historically the recipe for an extremely quiet Atlantic season. Some forecasters are now suggesting this season could rival 2015 in terms of Atlantic inactivity, and 2015 was one of the quietest Atlantic hurricane seasons in the satellite era, producing only 11 named storms with just 4 reaching hurricane status. But I will not let you leave today without this important caveat, because it matters for your safety planning. El Nino does not eliminate the Atlantic hurricane threat, it reduces the frequency of storms, and as AccuWeather has explicitly noted, El Nino patterns can actually place the storms that do develop on unusual tracks, because the altered upper-level steering currents can push systems in directions they would not normally travel. A below-average season in terms of total storm count does not mean zero risk for any specific coastal community. It means reduced probability across the basin as a whole. Those are very different things. Do not use a below-average season forecast as a reason to skip reviewing your hurricane preparedness plan. The National Hurricane Center currently shows no active tropical development concerns in the Atlantic through the next 7 days, no advisories, no areas of concern with meaningful probability attached. The Eastern Pacific, fully consistent with El Niño's amplification of tropical activity in that basin, is seeing some development near the Central American coast, but nothing threatening the continental United States in the near term. Here is where we stand as of today, June 12, 2026. El Nino has arrived. Officially, yesterday. It is going to keep strengthening. The modelling consensus gives a 63% chance of it crossing 2 degrees Celsius by fall, and some scenarios have it going significantly higher than that. The summer pattern in the United States is already responding. Heat and drought expanding across the west, an active storm and flood corridor developing across the central states, a gradually shifting precipitation pattern bringing more rain to the southern tier and parts of the Midwest, and a wildfire threat building in the interior west. The severe weather setup this weekend across the Central Plains is real, and it is dangerous. The Derecho corridor from the Dakotas through Kentucky is at elevated risk through this entire summer, and somewhere beneath all of it, the potential for one of the strongest El Nino events in recorded history is assembling itself in the Pacific Ocean, and it is going to make its full weight felt when fall and winter arrive. I want to ask you something right now. Which part of this forecast concerns you the most? The heat and drought building in the west, the severe weather and flood risk across the central states, or the long-range Super El Nino signal heading into fall and winter? Drop your location and your answer in the comments. I read every single one, and your feedback shapes what I cover next. If you made it all the way to the end of today's video, thank you. This kind of deep analysis takes real research time to put together, and the fact that you are here watching and engage means everything for this channel. Please share this video with anyone you know in the central, southern or western United States. The pattern we are walking into this summer is not something to be caught off guard by. The data is clear. The signals are documented by NOAA, the European Centre, and every major forecasting institution on the planet. And I am going to keep bringing you the full picture every single day so that you're never surprised by what the atmosphere is doing. Think about the friends and family in your life who live in the Central Plains, or along the Gulf Coast region, or in the interior west. They need to hear this information. Share it with them. That is what this community is built on, passing real forecast information to the people who need it most. Hit that like button if this breakdown gave you real, usable information you can act on. Subscribe to Sky Space Lab if you're not already here, because tomorrow I will be tracking the developing Rocky Mountain low very closely, and I want to have an updated severe weather outlook ready for next week before the pattern locks in. This is Sky Space Lab. Stay weather aware, stay safe. I will see you tomorrow.